Hello, everybody, and wherever you may be calling in from, whatever time of the day it may be as you're listening to this podcast, welcome to the Human Intelligent Dialogue. I am pleased today to have with me Miss Betsy, who I'll give her a chance here to really introduce herself and share with you some insights as to her background and so forth. But thank you for joining us. And like always, like I've shared with my audience, I always bring in people from different perspectives. There is one common theme that we have, and it is how do we help create the workplace a better human focused, human intelligent, human centered workplace at the end of the day. So Betsy, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Please tell us all about you, a little bit about how you got to this space and to this place and time, so forth, and the work that you've been doing over time.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's interesting, like about a year ago, I saw you speak. And so it's just kind of nice full circle that a year later, like here I am. So I'm really glad to be here. So how I came into this space is I've been in organization development for, I guess it's like close to 30 years or over 30 years, if I can just like be in anything that long. And I've started off in the field, loved consulting. I was an internal consultant at Disney for quite a while, and then I went out on my own to start my own consulting business. And I started to see something in the market that started driving me a little bit batty. Is I had like two different communities going on at the same time. Like I had other consultants who were trying to grow businesses, and then I had like my organization development and learning and development and all of those kind of people. And I had these two communities. This community over here who were just consultants. They were really, really good at making money. They were out there, they were marketing, they were landing really big contracts. And then they would post something on our online forums and be like, hey, I just landed an org design project. Anyone got anything? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like how are you going to go into an organization and do that kind of surgery on it without having any experience? So that started freaking me out. And then I see these other people who are so good at what they do. All of these like really heart-centered, purpose-centered, human-centered consultants, and they're sitting on the sidelines because they just have like issues with marketing. And I'm like, well, I got to fix this. Like, I got to get these people over here to win. And so I closed down my consulting business and I really focused on the brand messaging and positioning to help purpose-driven consultants. So I'm very clear now, like all these years later, like I don't work, if you want to be in consulting or coaching for the money, I'm not your girl. I want to work with the people who really want to make a difference into like what you talk about, like the human intelligent workplace, the human centered organization. Like we have to activate and work together, especially now to make these types of workplaces. So that's how I got into this space. So I don't do the work myself anymore with the executives and the leaders. I empower the people to get them into place, the right ones, the ones who really care, like people that you work with, the people that, people like you, like we need to win.
Yeah, yes, I hear you. So a couple of things come to mind as you say that. You and I were both, and you and I were talking about this, we're both in the fish tank at one time. You were in Disney, I was at Lockheed Martin and other organizations. Now we're outside of the fish tank looking into those organizations. The difference is I'm helping leaders help themselves. You're helping the coaches and consultants help themselves so that they can help the client at the end of the day. And
Yes.
you're right, definitely something needed. So we definitely need all those at the end of the day. So tell me something based on that movement that you made. What are some of the trends that you're seeing out there happening with your clients who are now coaches and consultants helping organizations out? What are you seeing with some of the trends that are taking place out there, especially in this human capital, human dynamic space?
So I kind of seen a trend over time. Like I remember when I was a new consultant, I was at Disney, we would do strategy sessions all the time. 3 days were not an issue, like totally fine. And we were always thinking about the long term. I started my consulting practice probably in that recession time period, and I started to see a shift in the organizations. It's almost like back in that time period where you had like this many employees to support this many customers, and the customers dropped out. So then they dropped the employee base down, the customers came back, and then the employee base came like this. And so now we're in these stressful organizations that are all geared towards like 90-day numbers. So what was really frustrating for me as a consultant was like massive organizational problems that needed to be solved and needed a long-term fix. It was like everything was geared towards the 90-day numbers. And I just see it getting worse and worse and worse. And I think like with AI and other types of things that are going in there is like the human is less. So when I use the example of like the 3-day workshop, when I was consulting, it would be a miracle to get executives to get together for a 4-hour work session. I'm like, how do you have a mental space to really discern what is the right strategy in a 4-hour rushed block? Like everything's rushed, everything's fast. So like more there's the technology and it doesn't to me support human processes of our brains. Like our brains only function at a certain level. It doesn't really work. You can't make good conscious decisions. And I just see that flywheel getting worse. And so then I see my consultants and the coaches that I work with, when they approach it, it's like, okay, now they're stuck on that flywheel. Like, how do I get more clients? How do I get more projects? And it's like, you're asking the wrong question. It's totally the wrong question. It's not about getting projects. If you want to get projects, then just go work for an organization. If you really want to help bring some sanity to the system, you got to go first and got to slow down. Like my clients as a consultant, when I was a consultant, they would say, "Oh, we want to, we do our strategy like we change the wheels on the car while it's still moving." I'm like, "Okay, how effective is that?" Like it's like, "Okay, maybe if there's a little problem, you can kind of change the wheels if it's moving." But most of the time if a race car's on a track, you have to pit stop it, and there has to be a pit stop. But let's say you decide, I want to compete in a whole different game. Like, I want to go completely different. I want to completely elevate it. You got to take the car off the track. You got to rethink, how the car is functioning. You got to rethink how the driver is able to perform, and everything has to be rethought. But we want to have that type of transformation, but with the wheels changing on the car, and then consultants and coaches, go along with it. And it's like more, more, more. We got to get things done faster. And I worry that with AI, same thing as like when our smartphones happened, is it did not reduce our workloads. It increased our workloads and it expected us to have more access, more 24/7. And I think AI is going to have that same thing. I think that, yes, it's great to have this tool, but I worry that our cognitive, creative, critical thinking processes are going to decline. And so I think that there's all these trends. And I think the problem I see with consultants and coaches is you're saying that we can't operate like the fish in the fish tank anymore. We have to use the fact that we're out of the fish tank to speak into the fish and say, are you really doing this the best way possible? Are you really creating a hospitable environment? Are you not seeing that there's all this gunk in this tank, and it's cloudy and the water needs to be changed? Like, you don't see it. I do. I'm outside the tank, but that's not what happens is I have to be relevant. So I'm going to jump in the tank and be like all my other clients.
Yeah, that's the thing to your point that some organizations do pay attention and listen, but you're right, there's some that don't. And when that happens, particularly with your clientele, with your other consultants like myself and executive coaches, they feel like they have to be on this fast spinning wheel. When how many times have we made a fast decision only to have to go back and refix it? So if we
Yeah.
just slow down, it can happen at the end of the day. So having said that, that one of the issues is that you just mentioned. What solutions are you recommending to your clients? What strategies do you see that are making a difference out there?
Well, when it comes to building your business, I always tell my clients the same thing I would tell my clients when I was a consultant is what I tell my consultants now is we need to go slow to go fast. Like you need to take a beat and there's a certain order. And if you want to avoid rework and if you want to avoid like false starts and all of that expense, like if it comes to your business, we need to go slow to go fast. Like we need to really get clear on who your ideal client is, what's the problem you solve, how you're positioning yourself, what messaging are you using, what are you selling, before you just go out there and get clients. Like this whole like just go out there and do this is just it's not compatible with our human design, as I mentioned. So I highly recommend to my clients like use like if you're in a transformational state, where you're like there's a distinct separation from where you are now to where you're going. You have to take a beat. This is why you see butterflies all over the place. Like on, you see it all over my office. You obviously see it on my arms. Is that the butterfly goes into the cocoon for a season. That there's work to be done. We have to reverence the liminal space, and we have to do that. And I think the same thing for if you're a consultant working or coach working with a leader is like you can't let fight or flight your survival, make decisions. It's a really good part of us that keeps us like alive, but it has zero interest in our highest potential. It's the worst strategist. It's going to create bad decisions. And so you need to establish the business case for why you need to take a beat and think this thing through, because how expensive are bad decisions? Like really think it through and say bad planning. I mean, you could just take a technology project and say, if you, let's say like one of my clients that I work with, this is like a horrible horror story. They thought that they needed to create an app for their customers to make it easy for them to do reservations online. But their client base were a lot of older people who really didn't use apps. Like that was not their thing. They spent $80 million on a technology project. And then they didn't really involve the business. Like, so they didn't really do it in a smart, strategic way. So now this $80 million project's over budget and it's like taking too long. So it's like way past due. And then on top of it, the outcome is that's not even what the customers wanted. They didn't even take the time to figure out the customers. So now they spent all of that money and then all of that stress and then all the organizational hassles. And then the CIO got fired because the project wasn't on time. It's like how much of this could have been avoided is like just take a beat and think it through. Invest in a 2-day workshop, like you need to get the data. You need to ask, you need to be listening. That's where the human component is. You're an organization and you're not here to serve 90-day numbers. You're here to serve the customers. And if you only think short term, then that's as long as your shelf life is going to be for your company. You're going to live 90-day numbers to 90-day numbers. Can you imagine like what it would be like? Like what kind of life is that? Is that my entire success is based in 90-day increments? Like that's where the insanity is. And now it's worse because if you're talking about what are the trends, like a lot of my clients are up at night with how do we hold the line on our values around diversity, equity, and inclusion, the things that are important to us. We want to create welcoming workplaces. And now we're in a broader global environment that says that's just like, that's just weak. Empathy is weak. This is stupid. You shouldn't do this. And it's like, but we know, let's just take the moral and ethics out of it. We know for sure there's a business case for it. Put the moral and ethics into it. How in the world do you create a sustainable organization if you don't have a moral and ethical foundation? So it's for consultants and coaches, it's figuring out how do we hold the line on the values of what we know that's important, what we will work, and be able to hold our own with executives and hold up the mirror to say, there's a better way, and I'm inviting you to take this better way to serve long term all the stakeholders and all the people that you want to satisfy.
It's interesting listening to you. You just made the case. In the era of AI, you're going to need HI, which is human intelligence at the end of the day. Slow down, think through things through versus react, 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 react. But now you got into another area that I wanted to tackle a little bit. So based on what you're seeing there with the future of work, future of AI, hybrid, remote, those kinds of environments, the whole workforce psychology and workforce evolution, from your clients' perspective, these who are helping organizations help themselves, consultants and coaches and so forth, what are you seeing play out there for for the future there?
I think that the problem that consultants and coaches have is like they're too short term and they're not thinking necessarily about the bigger global trends. It's usually people who are helping them. One of the people that I had on my podcast that I'm super excited about, her name is Beverly. She's the managing director of Peter Block's Design Learning Institute. And she has this whole paper that we talk through around the culture of positive accountability. Is that there's this whole perspective on how we think about leaders and employees and the relationship, and that we almost treat like employees like children. That we treat employees like we need to find a way to motivate them. We need to like find a way to satisfy them. We need to do all of these kinds of things. And instead of taking a step back, like this is why I love lean so much. As lean is foundational, is like it's the respect for people as like adults. Like how do we create cultures of positive accountability? And the problem that consultants and coaches who are in the trenches is like, I just need to get the project. I just want to land the employee engagement projects. Like I just need to land this, but they're not taking a step back to say, but why do I want this? Like what difference is this going to make in the organization? Like I think we really need to rethink what is employee engagement, what is a positive work environment that treats employees like adults and creates the conditions for adult to adult relationship where there's positive accountability, giving people the opportunity. Like I believe instead of like employee engagement, like we should be thinking about like employees and as entrepreneurs. Like this is what I teach my kids that I wish I could teach everybody in organizations is that you do good performance for your own benefit and your own book of work. Like there's a win-win collaboration. The employer and the employee is you give the employee the ability to do their best work and build their own book of work. Like that is what buys you options. So then if you're looking at hybrid and, virtual or what have you, like this is like just a crazy, ridiculous debate. Look at the workflow. And I mean, this is not rocket science. Look at the workflow and think about, well, what generally, or not generally, what legitimately needs to be hybrid in person, like, and there's workarounds. Like you see schools are adjusting to that where there's hybrid programs where you have to like go on in person for these weeks and then the rest of it could be virtual. Like, look at the workflow. Now, okay, so let's say you have a production line and they're like building XYZ widget. Well, clearly that has to be in person because everybody's building something together. If you're dealing with like a strategy session, it's probably going to go better in person. So bring people in, but you don't just look at the workflow. Like, we're overcomplicating these things. We're overcomplicating it. Let the employees tell you what do they need to do in order to do their job.
Yeah, and you alluded to this a little while ago too. It's the biases that we bring to the table. So, for example, to your point, you're right. Use common sense. Do I need to have them in the office, or can we do it this way? Obviously, we did it this way during COVID because we had to. So it's able to be done. But one of the interesting biases that's been called out there's called distance bias. If I don't have you in the room next to me, then I'm going to go find somebody that is, and I'll forget you because you're down the street or in some other office type of thing. And so I feel like they have the best answer because they're nearby. Maybe not. Maybe Betsy. I need to reach out to Betsy because she's somewhere else and she's going to bring me a different perspective that I haven't thought about. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing too that you're right. They're overcomplicating things when they don't need to. And by the way, remote and hybrid has been here for a long time, but all of a sudden the pandemic put it front and center and everybody saw this new Coca-Cola in the desert. How are we going to help leaders manage remote and hybrid? It's not a new phenomenon. It's been happening for some time. So how do we do that going forward? So
And
piggybacking
then
on, go
and
ahead.
and I just want can I make one comment on what you said? Is like this whole idea of like somebody's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to be overlooked if I'm not right there in that person's face." And it's like, "Well, then that's a you problem." Like then go make sure that you're top of mind because you're going to have that same problem if you're in the office. If you're somebody that they're going to overlook and they're not going to call because you're distant, then chances are if you're in a open air like open
Space.
space and there's all the cubicles, they're not going to gravitate to you anyway. Like I attract clients from all around the world. I'm certainly not connected. I've had clients in Australia, I've had clients in South Korea, I have clients in London, like I have them all over the world. So, like stop whining about that. That's why I believe like what Beverly says in design learning is the culture of positive accountability is like have everybody take responsibility for their own success. And then if you want your voice to be heard, then get your voice heard. But we don't need to create these workplaces to support like people like treating other people like they're children. We're adults going to work. We're not
Yeah.
children.
Yeah, and to your point, one other piece I'll add to that. And so yeah, that might be a person problem, but it also is a leadership problem. Because if I'm not making sure I'm including all of my folks in the conversation, then why am I missing these people? I mean, if they're part of my team, I need to make sure I engage them. I'm creating an inclusive environment. So and I'm listening to all the voices to make sure that we make the best decision at the end of the day. And unfortunately, sometimes, as you know, there's those out there, managers that have their favorites. Now, they would swear they don't have favorites, but the rest of the team says, "Oh, yes, they do." So they have to figure out how do I minimize that unconscious bias I may have that I forget the introvert, but I go to the extrovert or whatever the case may be. So
And I
yeah, go ahead.
and I think it's developing that leader to understand like I don't have all the answers. It's like some of the stuff that you and I are both fans of Rick Baumel, and it's like the whole listening mindset is I don't really have the best answer. So if I don't get this feedback, like we need to do like what's in it for you. Like not to say, "Oh, you need to make this person feel included." It's just that you're not going to have as a quality decision because if that person's on your team, then that person has a slice of data that you are not listening to. So what's going to happen if you cut off that data set? Like it's not logical to cut off that data set. So we have to kind of speak to that person of saying it does this, you're not going to have the best decision. This is your span of control. This person holds this piece of pie. Would you ever make a decision on anything without the all the data? Do you want to make a decision without all the data? What's the risk if you make the decision without all the data?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And so, and it's funny because as I listen to you, I'm thinking, I've been listening to this problem for a lot of years, and here we are front and center, and we have it again. So, but you bring a really unique angle and aspect to it because to the where we started, you're out there consulting to consultants and to executive coaches and so forth, HR business partners, whatever, CHROs. So, what actionable advice are you providing them that you would like to share on this call for folks like that? Because then maybe they can say, you know what, I need to reach out to Betsy because I never thought of it that way.
I think that what I would say is twofold is like you're, in the role that you have, or actually threefold, is that there's a role of leadership and it is not you. And you need to recognize like there's a difference in your kind of role. Like you need to let the client that you are working with, like they are owning the outcomes of whatever it is. But at the same time, we still have a vision for what's possible for that they can't see for themselves. And so it's up to us to proactively advocate for what's in the best interest of our clients and proactively advocate for our contribution in that. And so if you want a seat at the table with a voice that's heard, you have to proactively position yourself for that seat at the table. It's not going to come to you. You can put all you want on your website and all of this stuff and you say, "Oh, I have this 5-step methodology to X, Y, and Z," or "I have these aspirations," and you just are waiting, fingers crossed that they're going to connect the dots that you're the one who's supposed to be there. And what you need to do is figure out how do I get in the client's head and see where their heads are at and what they're struggling with and align what I'm trying to sell them on or pitch them on or influence on to what they want. That it's like they get to decide their direction. You can expand it and say there's better possibilities. Like when I think about some of the work I did at Disney, there was my biggest claim to fame was a project that I did that's now called The Basics, and it's being taught at the Disney Institute, all around the world. All that how that project came out is the executives were sitting around and saying, "Hey, we should do something for like the frontline managers. We haven't done anything for them for a while." Another executive said, "No, we should do something for the area managers." Another one's like, "Oh, we need to do something for the customers." So I went and I interviewed like all of the executives. I found the through line, pitched the project, and then created a highly collaborative kind of thing. And we created this whole initiative, and it's like I drew it out of them, but I gave them a project and an approach that they never would have thought of. I proactively advocated for what is possible for them that yes, you actually all. So what had happened out of that is they all had to give up how they were individually doing the guest cast and the cast leader interaction, and they agreed collectively to do something different and do it together, do it the same. That was not on their radar screen. That was not something that they were envisioning. So that's the role of consultants and coaches where we skate on the edge of the system. Like you said, the we're not in the fishbowl. Like we should always never like even if you're an internal consultant, you have to imagine that you're not in the fishbowl. You have to like observe the system, grab that outside point of view, get the vision for what's possible and position yourself. So if you're external, that means that you got to get out marketing and you got to start, like doing that kind of stuff. And if you're internal, it's like using influence, working through like I see that there's something better. This is what they said that they want, but there's something even better for them, and I'm going to advocate for what's in their best interest.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, you know, um, at the end of the day, what we people, particularly leaders, and that example you gave at Disney, you started to listen to understand versus to respond, which I think is what you've been alluding to, that sometimes a consultant is ready to respond versus listen to get to the core issue. Because when you start with the first, hey, this is my problem, you really got to dig down to peel back that onion to find out what the problem is at the end of the day. And so asking them and dig deeper to finally get to that issue by listening to understand, not to respond, not because I got to move on to the next project after that. That's really going to be a place where it's going to help, to your point, coaches and consultants. So, ladies and gentlemen, today, Betsy, any closing words you'd like to share for our audience?
Okay, so for consultants and coaches, this is like my I'm on a mission on this standpoint, especially those of you who really care about organizations, is I think is really important for us to really own the power of what we do and to not shirk back from what is possible for us. And so if you're an internal consultant, it's a little bit easier for you. So it's just really taking charge of your strategic positioning inside the organization. For who are external, it's a little bit more challenging for you because you've got some visibility stuff that you have to overcome. But the reason why we do it is in service of the organization. It's because right now, I believe now more than ever, organizations need consultants and coaches who can help them with what you're talking about with these human-centered organizations. We are at I think, an existential point, where all the things that we believe in and value is going to be harder and harder to come by. And so we all need to step up and step into our power and move forward, more collectively together to say, I really want to create these human-centered organizations. It's a game changer, it's a life changing, it's a world changer. It's so much more big, it's so much bigger than me. And I need to get over any fears I have around, like, can I really do this? Do I have what it takes? Like, we need to get over all of that and really position ourselves.
Thank you for that pretty very much. I appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we had Betsy Jordyn with us today. At the end of this video, you will see her contact information. Reach out to her. For those consultants and coaches out there, you too also need somebody to help you look in the mirror and reflect and think about, am I doing this right? Really, why did I get into this at the end of the day? And if what we're trying to do is build more humanity back into the organizations, then we need to bring our own humanity to the table. So, Betsy, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I hope this has been helpful for all of you. Again, I purposely made these short and sweet because I just want to touch the tip of the iceberg, and then eventually some of you reach out to Betsy and myself for some assistance. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day. We're glad that you stopped by to visit. We're in the business of helping organizations in the growing era of AI become more HI, and that is become more of a human intelligent workplace. And we do that in a variety of ways. We can do speaking engagements. I can come in and speak to you either at executive retreats, at offsites, keynotes, things of that nature, to kind of share with you some of the trends that are taking place and what the implications may be for your organization. Sort of in a way, put a mirror up to your organization and say, these are the things that are happening. Are you ready for them? Are you doing something about it? So that's just one way. Another way we do some work with organizations is through executive coaching, helping from VPs to frontline supervisors, those to soon to be in supervisory, high potential individuals, help them in their development. Also do leadership and team development work. And along with that, we use instruments to help organizations from a consulting perspective help themselves, whether it's the Human Intelligent Workplace instrument or questionnaire to take a sense of, hey, how are we doing in this space? Also, organizational change readiness questionnaire. Are you ready for the changes? What are you missing based on some of this information? And lastly, we also look at leader behavior effectiveness questionnaires. How well are your leaders doing? How do they assess themselves? And how are the workforce assessing them too, whether it be 360 or others? So we're here to help, particularly in this ongoing changing era that organizations are facing, a time of uncertainty, a time where the workplace or the workforce is expecting different things. So hopefully you'll reach out to us and let us know how we can help you out. You can look at some of our information that we have out on our website, some of the various podcasts, some of the articles and videos that I've put out there. And hopefully those will percolate and create some thoughts and reflective moments to think about, maybe we need to have a discussion with the human intelligent workplace. Thank you very much.